Mother-in-law urged me to recheck my prenup after inheritance talk. Husband dismissed it, but I discovered a shocking secret. To say I was happy with my husband, Nick, would be an understatement. I married the love of my life, and even my mother-in-law was awesome. Nick worked as a manager and was pretty busy all the time, but still made time to be with me. Mother-in-law stayed with us and got along with me very well. One day, mother-in-law and I were discussing something about inheritance when I told her that I got my parents' shares from them and that it was quite an amount. She grew silent and asked me why I wanted it so early. I replied that it was because of Nick and that he wanted me to have my inheritance so early. Mother-in-law had a calculating look on her face, and when she finally broke out of it, she asked me to check my prenup again. I was confused by that point. She refused to give me an answer and just asked me to do it and left. Immediately, I called my husband to ask what it was about. He reassured me that it was nothing and asked me to ignore her words. I didn't miss the slight panic in his voice when I told him at first. Something seemed off and I wanted answers, so I went back to mother-in-law and prodded for an explanation. She looked hesitant, but then said that she found certain documents while cleaning Nick's home office and found the prenup, except it mentioned the majority of my wealth and properties going to Nick. I was shocked. It wasn't what was mentioned in the prenup when I signed it. Before I could go check the prenup myself, Nick came back home and was in his office the whole time. I casually tried to ask him about it but grew angry when I kept asking about it. He promised to show it to me the next day since he was busy. The next day, however, I was not able to find any traces of the prenup in his office. I started getting suspicious, seeing how he was avoiding the topic like the plague and the prenup missing. I waited for another day, but still, there wasn't any progress. When he went away for a business trip, I decided to snoop in his office and finally found our prenup. I was shaking in anger by the time I went through the whole document. It stated that most of my properties would go to him if we divorced. I still couldn't believe such a version of our prenup existed, because the day I signed the prenup, both my lawyer and I went through the document and it wasn't the one I held in Nick's office. The one I was shown was the one where it mentioned that we get rights to our personal properties and shares. It was a fair agreement which Nick was totally fine with. I didn't know he went around my back to frame another one. I don't even know how or when the unfair prenup was written up. I called my lawyer from that time as soon as I saw it and explained the situation to him. But he sounded clueless and told me that there was nothing else to be done and that I was doomed. At that moment, I knew I had to rethink my skill in choosing lawyers. Before I spiraled thinking of hiring a new lawyer, I wanted to get answers. I was frustrated and stressed beyond control and was just walking around the office when I found a necklace lying inside one of the drawers. It belonged to my best friend, Molly. I was sure of it because I was the one who got it for her birthday and the design was customized. I felt my heart sinking by the second. Before jumping to conclusions, I decided to give her the benefit of doubt and called her. She told me that she was visiting her parents and that she'd be back only after 2 days. I cut the call and drove straight to her house, and as expected, I saw Nick's shoes outside, along with hers. I was fighting back tears when I went into the house. Molly was surprised to see me and was fidgeting a lot. I spoke loudly to her and asked Nick to come out of hiding. The two of them stood in front of me with guilt written on their faces. They began apologizing, but I knew they weren't the least bit sincere. Both my husband and my best friend tried to come up with excuses, and I listened to them struggling to find the same, believable lie. I waited till they stopped trying hard to cover up what they did behind my back. The prenup was in my hand and I raised it to show them and asked Nick what that meant. He looked shocked but regained his composure and told me that it was the original one. I wasn't ready to be fooled once again, so I stood my ground and told him that I'd sue him for changing the prenup. Nick looked at me like I was telling the funniest joke and started laughing. He told me that it wouldn't make sense since I signed the document in front of both his lawyer and mine, and that there was no proof that the other prenup was fabricated. I wasn't the smartest when it came to the law, so I had to get a lawyer well versed in this to fight back. It was then I looked at Molly. She was about to leave the house discreetly when I spotted her. I shouted and screamed at her for betraying me and even slapped Nick hard. It was satisfying. But he started shouting back at me, saying none of that would have happened if I had just ignored everything. He was planning to divorce me soon but wanted to keep everything else from me to protect my feelings. The way he presented it was like I was in the wrong for bringing up those topics and catching them together. They were two of the people that I trusted the most. And to have them betray me together made me feel sick. Before I did anything else, Molly's son started crying from the other room. A chill went through me and dread filled my mind when I asked Molly whether her baby's dad was Nick. Both of them refused to look at me, and that was all the answer I needed. When Molly announced that she was pregnant a year ago, I did everything to help her and the baby. She was hesitant to reveal the dad's name and I didn't push her, thinking she was having a hard time with it. Nick was unbelievably supportive and volunteered to take her everywhere while pregnant. While it seemed sweet at that time, everything seemed to make sense. When I went back home, the tears started welling up without warning. Mother-in-law was quick to rush to me and hold me tight while I cried my eyes out. I explained everything to her and she was ready to knock out Nick and my best friend. Am I the a-hole for digging into the prenup topic? I feel like I might have been better without unveiling all the drama. I have no idea what to do now or how I should move forward. It's so hard to trust people now. Update 1. Many of you guys have given me suggestions and advice. I'm really grateful for that. Nick didn't come back home for a week and it was better for him that way, as both mother-in-law and I were ready to kick him out if he came back. I was growing restless every day thinking about the prenup. I took the advice you guys gave me into account and reached out to a lawyer. He was Molly's ex and one of the best up-and-coming lawyers I knew. He wasn't available during the time we made the prenup agreement, otherwise I definitely would have chosen him. The lawyer told me that there were several complicated ways to settle that, but the best one was to get him to agree to nullify the prenup. It seemed impossible to me considering how he went the extra mile to even get me to ask for my inheritance from my parents hurriedly. I visited Nick in his office to ask him to modify the agreement, but he flipped. He told me that he loved Molly and wanted to provide for the baby too. I was stunned. Why did he have to take my money if he loved them so much? When I kept nagging him about it, he threatened to get me fired. My boss was one of his close friends and she wasn't my biggest fan. I froze for a second. It was like I didn't even know him anymore. He seemed completely different, manipulative and cunning. I couldn't even divorce that cheating jerk without losing most of my property to him. I'm not well aware of the conditions, but according to my lawyer, the agreement could have been considered invalid if the property division was too unfair, but the agreement mentioned most of my properties, but I was still entitled to get a certain amount. I guess that percentage wasn't an issue. It still was unfair to me even though it would seem normal in court. I backed down for the time being. Update 2. It was several days later when I received a call from Nick's secretary asking to meet me. I met her at a cafe and she got directly to the point. Nick was sleeping with my boss. He threatened me before using her and I could finally connect the dots. She was way too strict with me and I always wondered why she hated me so much. It finally made sense. Still, I couldn't believe he was using all these women at the same time. Fortunately, the secretary got me some photos as proof of their secret relationship and that was enough for me. I went to Nick's office immediately and showed him the photos. His face looked pale and started sweating a lot. He started cursing me and blamed me for ruining his life, but before he could go any further, I told him that I'd show those photos to Molly if he didn't agree to modify the prenup. He had no other choice but to comply. Nick looked like he wanted to murder someone, but luckily, fate was on my side. We met the next week to make changes to our prenup agreement. The whole time Nick was furious and anyone would notice it too. Molly was surprised to see her ex with me. I guess she didn't expect to see him after she broke things with him as soon as she learned about her pregnancy. After the prenup was modified, I filed for a divorce. Update 3. Thank you everyone for your messages. I bought an apartment and got back all my properties. Alimony was eliminated, which both of us agreed upon. Most importantly, I finally separated from Nick. It felt good. He was with Molly for a while, but somehow, she caught Nick with my boss and everything turned ugly. I resigned from my job and a better one at another company. Also, I got together with my lawyer, Molly's ex, and are going pretty strong now. I guess karma works, after all. I, 40 female, have been married to Chris, 42 male, for 10 years. His previous marriage ended very badly and his kids, 17 male, 15 female, have not seen their mom ever since the oldest was 4. When we got married he was 8 and his sister was 6 and they have always been adorable. We get along very well. When we spend time together, we play and laugh, or maybe they want to do something more calm and relaxing. Still, we do our best to make that activity enjoyable for everyone involved. It has always been like this, as it should. I don't push my interests on them and rather get to know what they like and try it and do something they actually enjoy, like sports. Me and Eric, the eldest son, love ice skating, while I love watching animes with Alice, the youngest daughter, as they are a passion for her. We have been watching Hunter x Hunter together lately. Even though they present me to other people as their mom and them telling me various times they look up to me as a mother figure, I have always understood they might not want to call me mom when me and them are having a convo or talking to other relatives, and that's totally fine. It isn't a problem. As long as we have an amazing relationship, I don't care whatever title they feel like calling me. However, this is a problem for my in-laws. His mom told me, but how can they not call you mom? You're their mother. And I gently explained to her that being a mother figure for someone and call that someone mom can be separate things, but she still insisted and insisted for days. She would call, text and even talk about it in presence, not leaving us alone for even a second. Last time we saw her, my husband lashed out at her about how she was basically harassing us, and when she looked at me in search of protection, I agreed with my husband and told her to please leave the matter. She doesn't hold any power against what the children prefer to address me as. My sister-in-law and other of his relatives later reached out to me later telling me I should have protected my mother-in-law to keep being a part of the family. Some of our friends have also said we are the a-hole for not making our kids call me mom on every occasion and how we should agree with his mother. Am I the a-hole for not insisting that my stepkids call me mom and not agreeing with my mother-in-law? Me 17 male and my little sister 12 female go to the same school. I go to 6th form at her school. We both get the same bus to and from school every day. So, my little sister has told me about this one boy, 14 male, and she thinks he takes pictures of her. I tell her to say something but she never has and I hadn't noticed it yet so I didn't know if she was lying. Usually, I sit nearer the back of the bus while she sits at the front. But on this one occasion the bus was very busy so I sat next to her leaving this old lady to sit where I usually sit. Now this boy she had told me about was sat in front of us and we were both minding his business when she took out my AirPod and pointed to his phone. He was scrolling through pictures of my little sister. What a creep. And at this point I was absolutely fuming. So here's where I might be the When I saw what he was doing I tapped on his shoulder and I told him what a creep he was and that was not the way to make friends. Bearing in mind he would try to talk to her a lot at school, I breaded him about it in front of everyone on the bus and made him delete every single photo he had of her. The next day his mom got on at my stop and started screaming at me how I embarrassed her son and that it was only a few photos and how he didn't mean any harm. I couldn't believe what I was hearing so I just walked away. I'm home now but I can't help but think what I did was a little out of line, so am I the a-hole? Update, I know I literally just posted this but I just got off of a meeting with my school because my younger sister had reported the incident and so had my mom. It turns out this is not the first time he has done this to someone and he has done many other weird things as well. I explained my side of the story and the school said I was definitely in the right. I will let you know when anything else happens but for now all I know is that we have reported it and the school will be taking this further.